Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, where I cover vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. In this video, I'm going to finally cover Bram Stokers Dracula. I've always wanted to cover this film because it's one of the most iconic vampire movies of all time. I just wanted to make sure that I did it justice. It was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, who is known for directing such films as Apocalypse Now and The Godfather. His son Roman Coppola also worked as the visual effects director for Bram Stokers Dracula. The movie came out in 1992 and is based on the original Dracula novel written in 1897 by Bram Stoker. Although this movie does take a few liberties with the story, this adaptation might be the closest and most faithful to the original novel. The cast in this film is amazing. Anthony Hopkins as Abraham Van Helsing, Winona Ryder as Mina Harker, Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker, and of course Gary Oldman as Dracula. Let's take a look at how Dracula became a vampire, his mysterious past, and if he really learned sorcery from Satan himself. If you enjoy videos about vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures, leave a like and subscribe for new videos every week. The movie begins in 1462. Just like the novel, this Dracula is none other than Vlad Tepes, more commonly known as Vlad the Impaler, for the horrific ways he would punish his enemies. Vlad was fighting a battle against the Ottoman Empire when something horrible happened. A single arrow was shot into Vlad's castle. Attached to this arrow was a letter, a fake letter saying that Vlad had been killed in battle. This had a terrible effect on Vlad's wife, Elizabeta. She was so distraught that she wrote a letter saying, "My prince is dead. All is lost without him. May God unite us in heaven." After writing this letter, she threw herself off the castle into the river, taking her own life. Vlad returns to the castle victorious from his battle, but finds Elizabeta dead, holding the letter she wrote. The sight of his dead wife, who he treasured above all else, left him speechless. To make things worse, the priest tells Vlad that because she took her own life, that her soul would be damned to hell. She could not be saved. This sends Vlad into a rage. "This is the reward I get for protecting God's church?" Vlad was a member of the Order of the Dragon, an order of nobility created in the Middle Ages to defend the cross and fight enemies of Christianity. So Vlad had literally devoted his life to God, until now. He screams out in anger and says, "I renounce God. I renounce him." This frightens the priests and they back up and begin to pray. Vlad tells them, "I will rise from my own death, to avenge her with all the powers of darkness." He then attacks the priest, grabs his sword and stabs it into the cross. This causes the cross to begin bleeding. Then blood pours from the candles in the eyes of the angels. Vlad picks up a chalice sitting nearby and catches the blood bleeding from the cross. He speaks in Romanian and says, "Blood is the life. The blood is the life, and it shall be mine." He drinks from the chalice as the whole room begins to fill with blood. When Vlad lets out his final scream, it almost sounds inhuman, like the darkness had already started to take over. The original novel never actually said how Vlad became a vampire. It was left very vague and mysterious. The movie of course changed this and gave us the scene we just looked at. Dracula renounces God and pledges his allegiance to the darkness, and this gives him supernatural powers. It's possible this power was given to him by a demon, or the devil himself. The movie also focused much more on Dracula's love life, with the relationship between him and Mina Harker taking center stage. This is a stark difference from the novel, where the romantic aspect is much more subtle. The film's decision to link Dracula's origin with a tragic love tale offers a human side to what is usually an evil and unredeemable character. In the year 1897, Jonathan Harker is being sent to Dracula's castle in Transylvania to assist him in purchasing Carfax Abbey, a property in London. First, Mr. Renfield was sent to complete this task, but he returned completely insane. Jonathan asks what happened to Renfield, but his boss says, "Don't worry about it." Some of the scenes of Jonathan on the train are really interesting and creative. I like the use of the train miniature and Dracula appearing in the sky as Jonathan reads his letter. That was a real image being projected onto a screen outside of the fake boxcar. Jonathan is riding the train to Transylvania and reads Dracula's letter. Dracula welcomes him to the Carpathians and signs the letter D. Jonathan is taken by carriage to a road near the castle. The carriage comes to a stop and he says, "We're early. There's no one here." The other people in the carriage seem uneasy. One of the women says, "For the dead travel fast," and hands him a small crucifix before leaving. Jonathan sees a bat-like creature pinned up, but it looks much too big to be an ordinary bat. Then some wolves begin to surround him and we hear loud howling. Just when things are looking bad for Jonathan, a carriage arrives pulled by black horses. The person driving the carriage doesn't seem like a person at all. It's a large creature with some kind of covering over its head. The creature speaks no words when it arrives. It simply sticks out its arm and guides Jonathan into the carriage. What's weird about this is Jonathan is standing around 10 feet away from the carriage, but the creature's arm is able to extend all the way out to grab him. This is a moment that Francis Ford Coppola really enjoyed in the book, so he decided to put it in the movie. Also, all the effects for the movie were done in camera, which gives the whole film such a unique feel, especially in conjunction with the gothic styling. So the creature reaches out and puts Jonathan in the carriage. When it does this, we see its monstrous looking hand with sharp nails. We never see this creature again, and we're never told exactly what it is. Some people have speculated that this could be Dracula himself. I think it's most likely some kind of cursed creature in his servitude for some reason. When they arrive at the castle, the carriage goes through these strange blue flames. It seems to be some kind of magic, maybe to protect the castle in some way. When Jonathan finally arrives at the castle, he's greeted by Dracula. The costumes for this movie are amazing. Dracula's attire is very unique in this film, but it suits him very well. The film actually won an Academy Award for Best Costume Design. We can see that Dracula's appearance has changed quite a bit. He's now around 460 years old. In this time, he's learned much about his dark gift and sorcery. Dracula says something interesting to Jonathan during dinner. He says that the blood of Attila runs in his veins. Later in the film, he introduces himself as Prince Vlad of Secoli. The Secoli people were a group of Hungarian Catholics that have historically claimed to be descended from Attila the Hun. During dinner, Dracula does not eat any food. He says it's because he already ate, but it's obviously because he feeds on blood. It's possible that he cannot consume normal food at all, but that's never outright stated. After dinner, Dracula signs some papers and he's now the owner of Carfax Abbey in London. The Count says he is very excited to be in the rush of humanity. He sees the picture of Mina, Jonathan's soon-to-be wife, and she looks exactly like Elisabetta. Jonathan says they are to be married soon. Then he asks if the Count is married. This is when his shadow looks like it's choking Jonathan, even though he's actually standing still. He also knocks over a bottle of ink with his shadow. This is an interesting departure from the novel, because in the novel, Dracula has no shadow at all. The idea of being able to control your shadow is a cool ability, especially if you can affect things in the physical world, like closing a door, which Dracula does. Nearly the entire time, Dracula's shadow seems to be slightly out of sync with him. It's such a small detail you might not notice, but it's so cool when you do. This has led some people to believe that his shadow could possibly be some kind of conjured entity. Dracula ends up telling Jonathan that he must stay at the castle for a month to help teach him English and the customs of England. This ends up being an elaborate trap for Jonathan. Jonathan writes this in his journal: "I think strange things I dare not confess to my own soul. The Count, the way he looked at Mina's picture fills me with dread, as if I have a part to play in a story that is not known to me." Jonathan did in fact have a role to play. Well, more accurately, his wife did. Dracula's goal is to travel to London, turn Mina, and make her his bride. The movie alludes that Dracula believes that Mina is a reincarnation of Elisabetta. Jonathan is shaving in the mirror when Dracula's hand touches his shoulder, but when he turns around, Dracula is still in the doorway. He comes inside, and when he stands in front of Jonathan's mirror, it breaks. This is strange because Dracula has no reflection, and we see this later in a window. But maybe this didn't break because it's a window instead of a mirror. Romans believed that mirrors could trap the soul. Dracula not having a reflection could be a way of saying that he has no soul, and he actually later confirms himself that he has no soul. This makes you wonder if his soul is what he gave up in order to gain these abilities. Since the mirror is now broken, Dracula helps Jonathan with finishing his shave. He gives Jonathan a warning: should you leave this room, you will not by any chance go to sleep in any other part of the castle. It is old and has many bad memories. Be warned. Jonathan says he understands. This is when the Count sees the crucifix Jonathan was given by the woman in the carriage. The sight of it causes Dracula to let out a demonic growl and recoil from Jonathan. Dracula says, "Do not put your faith in such trinkets of deceit." Even after almost 500 years, he still has a hatred of religion and all its symbols. Dracula warns Jonathan that he will see many strange things. Suddenly, dozens of wolves begin howling. This prompts the famous line,
"The children of the night. What sweet music they make."
This causes Jonathan to become more uneasy, saying, "Music? Those animals?" Dracula leaves the room and we see his shadow on the wall push the door shut. Then a few moments later, Dracula is seen outside, crawling across the castle walls like a spider. Dracula has many supernatural gifts. In the novel, he is described as a powerful sorcerer and necromancer. But how did he learn these abilities? I guess it could be through trial and error, since he's been alive for almost 500 years. Or maybe he was taught some of these abilities by someone else. In the novel, it is mentioned that Dracula studied magic at a special school. Romanian folklore speaks of something called scholomance. It is rumored to be a school hidden away in the Carpathian Mountains. Here, students are taught the dark arts, and the teacher is the devil himself. During their schooling, which typically lasted around 7 to 9 years, the students remained within the school with no sunlight or contact with the outside world. Although 10 students were admitted at a time, only 9 students would graduate. The 10th student was claimed by the devil as payment. Romanian tradition said that this unfortunate student would become the devil's assistant by helping him make thunderstorms. Some people have pondered if Dracula was this 10th student, and that's how he was turned into a vampire. Because in the novel, it's never revealed exactly how he was turned. But in the movie, we do see how this happens. However, he could still have studied at this mysterious school. The person in the book who mentions this school is Van Helsing. By linking Dracula to this school, it hints at the idea that he not only has natural inherent vampiric abilities, but also magic sorcery as well. This is not explored in depth in the movie, but it offers some more lore and an interesting piece of information to think about. The fact that Dracula would study at a kind of school like this to hone his magic would make a lot of sense, because it said that Dracula was extremely smart. A quote from the book says that there wasn't a branch of knowledge that he has not essayed on. Dracula from the film also seems extremely smart. Definitely someone who would go seeking forbidden knowledge and power.
It's the cause. It's the cause, my soul.
Bram Stoker himself and many pieces of lore in the Dracula novel were influenced by the work of Emily Gerard. She was a Scottish author who lived in Transylvania for a short while due to her husband's military posting in the Austro-Hungarian army. Her experiences there inspired her to write on the local customs, beliefs, and superstitions of Transylvania. One of her most influential works, The Land Beyond the Forest, published in 1888, delves deep into the local folklore, offering a look into myths, legends, and supernatural tales. One of these includes the scholomance. Dracula has many unique abilities and is much more powerful than the other vampires in the story. I want to take a minute to talk about a couple of these different abilities. First, he is very skilled in shapeshifting. While many associate vampires with turning into bats, Dracula's shapeshifting abilities are much more extensive and nuanced. Throughout the film, we get to see his transformation into many forms. He often takes the form of a wolf. He can also turn into what is basically a werewolf, half-man, half-wolf creature. This is something Stoker took from Gerard's studies on Transylvanian folklore. In the castle, we see Dracula has hair on his palms, and this confuses Jonathan. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. However, this is actually based off legends that werewolves could be identified by having hair on their palms. So Dracula from Bram Stoker's novel is actually kind of like a combination of a vampire and werewolf-like creatures. Upon rewatching the movie, I had completely forgotten about him turning into a werewolf. We never see Dracula take the form of a normal bat. However, we do see him transform into this massive bat-like creature, standing at what looks to be around 10 feet tall or possibly even taller. In this form, he has huge wings, sharp fangs, and large bat ears. The ability to turn into a mist is one of Dracula's most useful abilities. While the novel alludes to this ability, the movie shows us how it might look. This form allows Dracula to move completely undetected, passing doors and other barriers. He does this in order to get closer to Mina while the house is being protected. He easily slips past everyone and then takes his human form again once inside. In my opinion, one of the creepiest scenes in the movie is when Dracula backs into the shadows and then he turns into a bunch of rats. It's possible he could transform into any form that he wants, or he might be limited to animals such as bats, wolves, rats, creatures of the night. I think one of Dracula's best uses of his shapeshifting ability is when he transforms into a younger version of himself that bears no typical vampire features. This transformation is not just about aesthetics, but is a symbol of his quest to integrate into society and perhaps relive the days before he was cursed. This ability allows Dracula to easily move through public places. His interactions with Mina in this form emphasize the duality of his character, a monster capable of deep love and obsession. Dracula can turn into a wolf and seems to have a connection with them. They started to surround Jonathan when he arrived near the castle, and I can't help but think that this was Dracula's doing, maybe trying to scare Jonathan or just keep an eye on him. It's never seen, but presumably he can control bats too, and since Dracula could turn into a pack of rats, he might be able to control them as well. The novel says that Dracula is a necromancer. This is the dark ability to raise or control the dead. I was thinking that maybe the creature that was driving the carriage was a result of necromancy. Dracula also has the ability to exert control over the very elements, often manipulating the weather to suit his needs. He can create fog to hide his movements, wind to terrorize his enemies, and even full-on lightning storms. Both times when Dracula traveled across the ocean, it caused a massive storm. It's not clear if he did this on purpose or if it was just a result of him traveling across water. Dracula has very impressive hypnotic powers, able to enslave the mind and command people to do whatever he wishes. He can manipulate people in very subtle ways, like getting them to look his direction. When I seen this clip again, I immediately thought of the clip from What We See in the Shadows.
See me. She can't see me from that angle.
Before Jonathan Harker was sent to Castle Dracula, the law firm that he worked for had sent someone else first. His name was Renfield, and like I said before, he made it back to London no problem. But when he returned, he had completely lost his mind. Or so it seems. We see him at an insane asylum eating flies. He thinks that by eating insects he can absorb their life. He compounds this effect by feeding the flies to a spider, then the spider to a bird. Then if he eats the bird, he will get more life. Next, he wants to introduce a cat into this equation. He is always speaking of the master, and we can quickly surmise that he's talking about Dracula. At first, it seems that Renfield is a loyal servant, but that doesn't actually seem to be the case. Closer to the end of the movie, Renfield has a moment of clarity where he warns Mina that his master is coming for her. Then he says, "I'm not a lunatic. I'm a sane man, fighting for my soul." This sounds like Dracula has used some kind of magic on Renfield to make him into a thrall. After Renfield betrays his master by warning Mina, Dracula uses telekinesis to slam him against the bars and kill him quite easily. This is extremely impressive because he killed someone with telekinesis without even being there. Unless the green mist was implying that he was there in mist form. I'm not sure. Still, even then, he was able to kill someone with telekinesis while being in mist form. Pretty powerful.
You have betrayed me.
Dracula was able to manipulate people without even being around them. He did this with Mina's best friend Lucy. Through some kind of mind control, he was able to make her walk outside in the middle of the night and allow Dracula to bite her. After snapping out of it, Lucy says it was like some force was pulling her and she couldn't resist. The same way he controls Lucy and Renfield is possibly how Dracula controls the gypsies to help maintain his castle and do his bidding during the day. When Dracula plans to travel to London, we see his workers loading his coffin and transporting him to the docks. They also fight on his behalf later in the movie, putting their lives on the line. If he isn't using some kind of magic to control them, maybe they pledged allegiance to Dracula because of his dark power, or maybe he threatened them. Dracula traps Jonathan in the castle with his 3 brides and leaves for London on the Demeter. He made it to London and killed the entire crew of the ship on the way. Once he arrives, it doesn't take long for him to bite Lucy Westenra. After Lucy is bitten, she becomes sick and starts acting very strange. Her doctor can't figure out what's going on with her. He tests her blood, but it appears normal. This prompts the doctor to call his mentor, Abraham Van Helsing. Van Helsing says he always comes when his friends call, so here he is. He arrives and quickly discovers that this is no normal sickness. She is becoming Nosferatu. Van Helsing also figured out that it was none other than Dracula that turned her. This is actually good news to Van Helsing, because he has been looking for this creature his whole life. He tells the doctor they must do a blood transfusion immediately, which at the time was an extremely experimental procedure. This blood transfusion does help Lucy, but unfortunately, not for long. Lucy eventually dies, but Van Helsing takes her new husband and a few others to check her coffin. When they slide the lid off, she isn't there. This causes her husband to freak out, thinking this is some kind of trick by Van Helsing. But then, they hear someone entering the room. It's Lucy, and she's carrying a small child. This tells us that you have to actually die and then are reborn as a full vampire. Lucy has extremely pale skin, similar to Dracula himself, where his brides had more of a human skin tone. They actually filmed Lucy walking up the stairs backwards and then reversed the footage to give it an unnatural feel. So many cool effects in this movie. They defeat Lucy by using a cross to push her back into her coffin. The cross even makes her go back to sleep as if she was still dead. It also causes her to throw up some blood. After she went back into her sleeping state, they drive a stake through her heart and cut off her head. Van Helsing says this is the only way to ensure death. As soon as Lucy is killed, Dracula is instantly aware and angry. While Jonathan Harker is still trapped in the castle with the 3 brides, Dracula begins to seduce Mina. He alludes to the idea that she is a reincarnation of his wife Elisabetta. He says this, "I have crossed oceans of time to find you. Do you believe in destiny? That even the powers of time can be altered for a single purpose?" Mina also says strange things, like, "It's your voice perhaps. It's so familiar. It's like a voice in a dream I cannot place, and it comforts me when I'm alone." I think this is saying that Mina, or Elisabetta, has memories of Dracula or things she remembers that feel like a dream to her. It's also possible that Dracula's magic and mind control is influencing Mina to say what he wants her to say. The idea of Mina being a reincarnation of his wife is an invention of the movie, but a very interesting one. Mina and Dracula have an affair together for a while, until Jonathan eventually manages to escape from the castle and sends a letter to Mina. She is overjoyed and immediately leaves to marry Jonathan. However, Dracula will not let Mina go that easily. He returns to her home and bites her. He actually stops himself from biting her at first, saying that he cannot condemn her to the same life as him. But she actually wants to be turned. Or I guess Elisabetta wants to be turned, so her and Dracula can be together forever. Before Dracula actually turns her, he says to walk with me. You must die to your breathing life and be reborn to mine. I give you life eternal, the power of the storm and the beasts of the earth. This means in the movie that the powers of controlling the weather and command over animals are not some kind of learned magic, but natural abilities for vampires. Mina even gains the ability to create the blue flame magic that was in front of Dracula's castle. However, we never really find out what these blue flames outside the castle were for. When Mina does it, it appears to be affecting the weather because the flames go into the sky and cause some lightning. It's important to note that in order to be turned into a vampire, you must not only be bitten, but also drink vampire blood. After Jonathan escapes the castle and makes it back to London, Van Helsing asks him a question. Did he drink any vampire blood? Jonathan was fed on many times, but never drank any blood, so he did not turn. While Dracula was turning Mina, Van Helsing and the other men were on a hunt to find Dracula's resting place, aka the coffins full of dirt. Since Jonathan helped Dracula buy Carfax Abbey, they knew exactly where they were. These boxes of soil are very important, as it provides Dracula with a sanctuary where he can rest and regain his strength. Each one of these 50 boxes serves as a portable lair for the Count, allowing him to hide and recover anywhere in London. For some reason, part of his curse is that he must rest on the soil of his homeland in order to regain his strength. This is why he brings so much dirt with him. His plan was to eventually place these coffins at his different properties so he would have many places to rest, but he never got the chance. Since he needs to rest on his native soil to regain his strength, I wonder what this means exactly. Would he eventually be weakened to a human level, losing his supernatural abilities? Or would he just die? My guess is that he would slowly weaken and then eventually die if he didn't rest on Transylvanian soil. Once the boxes of Transylvanian dirt are found, they consecrate each box with holy water, rendering them uninhabitable for Dracula. Then they proceed to burn them. This act not only weakens Dracula by depriving him of his resting places, but also limits his movement within London, making him vulnerable. For a moment, we get to see the book that Van Helsing is reading from. The page says, exorcising a demon possession. This is further proof that Dracula's power comes from a place of evil, a demon, or the devil himself. With all of his resting places burned, he's in a tough spot. Dracula now has no place to regain his full strength, or possibly just this one coffin. Because of this, Dracula decides to retreat to his castle in Transylvania. He is escorted in his coffin by the gypsies. Dracula now poses a great threat to them if he decides to return. Plus, Mina is turning into a vampire. Their only hope to save her is to defeat Dracula. If he is killed, then Mina will be cured. Mina's bond with Dracula grows stronger. The transformation into a vampire has begun. Van Helsing, realizing the deepening connection, uses Mina to track the Count by hypnotizing her. By doing this, he finds out that he's on a boat, sailing back to Transylvania. Understanding the grave threat Dracula poses, Professor Van Helsing, Jonathan, and the others embark on a mission to track down and destroy the Count before he can regain his full strength.
We left London by train and crossed the English Channel that night in stormy seas.
Dracula ended up being able to stay one step ahead of Van Helsing's plans all along, because Dracula and Mina have a mental connection, so he knew their plans every step of the way. This leads them to splitting up into two groups, that way Dracula cannot track all their movements. Before reaching the castle, Van Helsing and Mina have to spend a night in the Transylvanian forest while the others go on. During the night, Dracula's three brides appear. I forgot to mention that one of Dracula's brides is seen having snakes in her hair. This seems like a reference to Medusa, but I'm not sure. The brides attempt to capture Mina and kill Van Helsing. One of them begins singing, almost like a siren song, while the other is whispering. This causes Mina to lose control of herself and start acting more like a vampire. At the same time, Van Helsing is put into some kind of trance. Luckily, Van Helsing snaps out of it and uses a communion wafer to burn Mina's forehead, which snaps her out of it as well. He then uses his torch to draw a circle of flame around them, which the brides cannot enter. This must work like a salt circle, not allowing evil spirits to pass over it. I wonder if this same method would work against Dracula.
No! You're safer than the circle.
The next morning, Van Helsing finds where the brides are sleeping and decapitates them. No stake to the heart this time. As for vampire weaknesses, a cross was used against Lucy and it worked pretty effectively. It would also probably burn vampires' skin like the wafer. Since holy water is used to destroy Dracula's resting place, I assume that it would burn vampires as well. Since the cross, wafers, and holy water work, it's possible that any holy object would harm vampires. This stems from Dracula's hate of God and the feeling that he was betrayed. Holy objects don't affect him in the same way though. When Dracula sees the cross around Jonathan's neck, he recoils from it. But when they tried to use a cross against him in his giant bat form, it had pretty much no effect. He said, "You think you can destroy me with your idols?" Then he makes the cross catch fire. So clearly being the first vampire makes him unique and not susceptible to the same weaknesses. Dracula can even walk in the sun with little consequences. Although Van Helsing says he is weaker during the day. We never see any other vampires walk around in sunlight, so maybe only Dracula has the ability of day walking. Eventually, Van Helsing, Mina, Jonathan, and the others reach Dracula's castle. The group is met with resistance from the gypsies. Meanwhile, Van Helsing is still looking after Mina, but she is being drawn to Dracula. She begins speaking another language and using her vampire magic. She shoots some of those blue flames that we see in front of Dracula's castle. They go into the sky and appear to change the weather. It's possible that Dracula was making Mina do this, rather than her doing it of her own free will. Although this could have been Elizabetta trying to help her husband. The men fight their way through the gypsies, and just as they make it inside the castle walls, the sun goes behind the clouds. We know Dracula can walk in the sun, but Van Helsing said he is weaker during the day. That's probably why he waited for the sun to go away before exploding out of his box. They manage to catch Dracula off guard, and Quincy stabs Dracula in the heart with his large knife. This causes Dracula to start writhing around on the ground in pain. He is wounded, but not finished. As they all step forward to kill him once and for all, Mina steps between them, with a gun, defending Dracula. Knowing that there's something else at play here, they let the two retreat into the castle, knowing that Mina must be the one to finish him off. Also, Quincy, the one who stabbed Dracula, dies from a wound that he got from the gypsies. Rest in peace to the guy who actually defeated Dracula.
Yes, my God has forsaken.
The dying prince seeks refuge in his castle, with Mina by his side. While lying on the ground in pain, he says, "Why has my God forsaken me?" But then Mina, aka Elisabetta, shows him that she still loves him. The look in Dracula's eyes says it all. He had in fact not been forsaken. There they were, back in the very room where Dracula's curse had began. The room suddenly lights up. Mina says, there in the presence of God, her love could release them all from the powers of darkness. A divine light literally shines down on Dracula's face, and this changes him back into his human self. I'm not sure if he just looks human or if he's actually human here. I also never noticed this before, but when it cuts to the cross, the spot where Dracula originally stabbed it is now healing.
I understood at last how my love could release us all from the powers.
Dracula says, "Give me peace," and Mina shoves the knife the rest of the way into Dracula's heart. Once Prince Vlad is dead, the burn that Mina had on her forehead from the wafer immediately disappears, proving that if Dracula is slain, then those he turned will be cured. Or at least those who are not fully turned yet. Mina, or Elisabetta, I don't even know who she is at this point, but anyway, she cuts his head off as well just for good measure. They always seem to follow up the stake to the heart by cutting off the head, but this is probably a good idea, especially when it comes to Dracula. The ending of the movie taking place right where the story began is a great touch. I honestly couldn't imagine it taking place anywhere else. Even after everything Dracula has done, you can't help but feel for him in this scene. The music in this part really hits it home too. That's my video on Bram Stokers Dracula. I hadn't seen this movie in quite a while and I forgot how good it really is. I know a lot of people like Dracula Untold and it has won multiple polls asking what's your favorite Dracula movie, but this movie is truly something special. Gary Oldman not winning an Oscar for this movie was like Saving Private Ryan getting beaten by Shakespeare in Love for Best Picture. It's basically a crime. Let me know what you guys think. Is Bram Stokers Dracula one of your favorite renditions of Dracula? And do you think it's one of the best, if not the best? I like how this movie makes Dracula more than just some mysterious monster. It makes him a character in the story, which is much more interesting to me. I just realized this while recording, but it's interesting that two of the most popular renditions of Dracula portray him as a man who will do anything for love, maybe even an anti-hero in some ways, rather than just being a mysterious man with no background who kills for no reason. The new Dracula movie, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, is more similar to older Dracula films. He is just a pure evil force, with not too much thought about how he became that way or why. I think the idea of Dracula hating God or being at war with him eventually inspired the movie Dracula 2000 in some ways, which I think in turn inspired many of the shows and movies we have today that link religion, God, angels, and the devil to vampires so often. I hope even if you've seen this movie many times that maybe you learned something new or I pointed something out that you never noticed before. If there's any other movies, TV shows, or video games you want me to cover, please leave them in the comments below, as I always read through them. If you enjoyed, leave a like, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't. It helps out a lot and I really appreciate it. As always, an extra big thanks to my members for going the extra mile to support the channel. Roderick, Jason Miller, Zothar's Paradox, Adam Okabe, Gabriel Ragsdale, Matthew Batson, Dragon Faye Rose, Emily Nixon, Onyx Cat, Dominique Toussaint, Zara Shadow, Steve Lloyd, Jake Walker, Awesome Pea Shooter, Cyper 2890, Mark Thorpe, Stephen 556, Owen Wildish, and Joseph Roman. Thanks again to my members and thank you all for watching. See you in the next video.